Sometimes, Sophie, you remind me about sharing about when the men would have gone to the army, and I remember hearing that Maxime Lépine, Auxile's grandmother, I think it was been Marguerite McDougall. Anyway, her husband went to the Yukon for the gold rush, and these women would have been home alone raising these kids for years and years and years. And I just heard that story.
Yeah.
I thought, oh my God, Grandma, 10 kids. Maxim goes off for the gold rush to make money. Either they went to the military, the gold rush, the rail. I think, how did these women survive? What would have been their strength? They would have had a lot. They have 10 kids.
I think they were so busy they didn't think anything of it.
What that would have been like. Our grandmothers with their husbands gone for all these years.
Yeah. It's amazing. Métis women are such strong women. Very, very strong women. They have part of the native blood in them, and part of the European blood makes a very strong mixture.
What kept them strong, do you think, in those hard times?
I think they loved their husbands, maybe. I think that had to be a good point. They loved their husband, they loved their children, so I guess they just figured it's the way of life to do. I do what I have to do.
So what would happen if someone was sick? Like if a child got sick, or like when you were young, if you got sick, what would happen?
They'd run to some old lady that knew about Indian medicine. They called it Indian medicine. There's this one old lady, they used to get her to go all over the place because when children were sick, she had to go with her medication. She had a little black bag with weeds of one kind for something and weeds for something else, And I remember when I was about 6 years old, I had a terrible, terrible nosebleed, and they couldn't get it stopped. So my mom went and they got the old lady, and she said, well, go get a bunch of ice, lots of ice. So they put ice all around me, and I was freezing. And she said, make her drink Pabina juice. Cranberry juice, they put now there. And she said, she'll be okay. Finally, the bleeding stopped. I don't know whether it was because they froze me to death. I remember I was just shivering. I was so cold. They had ice all along me on my forehead and on my shoulders, and they were really freezing me. So maybe that's why the bleeding stopped, or it was just natural that the bleeding would stop. I don't know. But I 12 hours.
Oh my goodness. So, did your mom and you learn a lot about herbs? Was that just a natural part of your life as well, or was that more?
I knew quite a few herbs, like through Granny, the other herbs that for this and that. And I remember we used to pick these broadleaves. It was called plantain, and oh my God. She used to dry these leaves and keep them, because if somebody had a real bad cut or infection, even when they were dried up, they could crumble them and wrap them up, and that would stop the infection. That was called plantain.
And did you help pick them?
Pick them?
Like, did you help pick the plants?
Oh, yes.
Yeah?
It was easy to pick these plantains. But you don't see stuff like that. And then there was turkey weed, and nettle roots, and wormwood. The wormwood, to me, it smelled like marijuana. And they used to make a tea with that. And if somebody had lots of high fever or something, they'd make them drink this wormwood tea. And the turkey weed is, if you had stomach, they mixed the turkey weed and nettle roots. They made a tea with that, and that was good for the stomach. Like the people had ulcers of the stomach or something, they drank that. And then there was another little weed. I don't know what the heck it's called, but they make a tea with that. If somebody had the, well, they used to call it the summer complaint. You know, somebody had a bad diarrhea and stuff. They make a tea with the little weeds. Boil with little weeds and strain it and make them drink that, and it would the diarrhea would just about stop instantly. Those are little medications that I remember.
And those plants all grew around in the area
Oh, yeah.
where you were, so you would
Yeah, you could pick them any old place.
We were picking plantains on my land this summer.
Oh, really?
Plantains.
Really? Did
Yeah,
you keep them?
Well, I didn't know that we could dry them, because now that I know, they dried up, so I just threw them out, but I didn't know we could.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My mom used to dry them, and then you could crumble them, and then if you got a bad infection on your hand or something, you make a little poultice and wrap it around. And
because there's some that grow on our land there, but you're right, there's not that many. Was there about lots of plantain? Because there's just few we found. Or did they used to grow in big?
Yeah, they used to grow in patches before. And also a shingle. If somebody had a bad bladder infection, you know those cedar shingles, those wood shingles there? You'd boil the shingle and make the person that had a bad bladder infection drink it. It would help the bladder infection.
And the cranberries, would they have, that lady who told you, that medicine woman about your nosebleed, the cranberries, they would have probably picked.
About this big and flat, about so high. And then she had another one about this big, kind of like an oval shape. And she used to squash her berries, but oh, terrible mess. I didn't use the stones. I used to grind them with the little machine there. Because that made enough mess of it, but they're so good.
You need to get your recipe.
There's
They
not
would have
much
kept
more.
those for the year, I suppose, eh? Like they would
Yeah.
have preserved well, I guess.
Oh, they're so good. Especially with nice thick cream. And when I moved from my house, the girls were cleaning my deep freeze. They didn't know what it was. They threw my little choke cherry cakes away in the garbage.
Oh.
And you know, they have such a nutty taste. You know, choke cherry jelly has such a special taste, right? Well, when they're ground up, you have that choke cherry jelly taste and a nutty taste, because these are you. the little pits, I guess you call them, little stones in them or whatever. When they're ground up, they have a nutty flavor to them. Oh, can't describe how good it is.
You want to take a pause?
Want to take a break? Okay.
Métis settlements in Batoche, things like that.
Oh, well, my grandparents settled mostly in St. Louis, and my great-grandparents, my great-grandfather McDougall, he had the ferry for years in St. Louis. He was the master ferryman in those days, and they lived right down by the ferry there. So, and I used to, after they took the ferry out in 1928, once they put the side bridge on, the side rails on the bridge there,
Oh,
the traffic bridge. before it was only the train could go through. And then they put the sidings on, and where the very few cars there were in those days could travel, but the buggies and wagons and that could go across. So they took the ferry out in 1928.
Oh.
Same year as I was born. But my great grandparents lived there, and Granny also lived there. Well, Granny was 5 years old when she came from BC. Granny's parents were like gypsies.
Oh.
When they were first married, they got married in St. Laurent, and then she taught school for a couple of years, and then they moved to Montana. And she often told me about those limestone caves, and she used to tell me how beautiful it was, and with the water dripping lime and that. I wonder if that really happened, you know. But now those limestone caves. When I was a little girl and my granny was telling me about that, it didn't mean anything to me really. But now I know. And then from Montana, they moved to BC because my grandpa was working in the coal mines in BC, and they lived in Fernie. And when they had that big fire in Fernie, I don't know if you ever heard about that big fire in Fernie. My grandparents were living there then. And then when there's Frank Slide, my grandpa was one of the men working there trying to uncover, and he was there when they found the little girl with her little dog. And my grandpa told that story a lot. And he also told about this old man that laid across the track to stop the train. When they had that Frank Slide, there was this old, and if they had listened, well, it probably would have happened anyway, but my grandpa said that when they were living, like Frank Slide is not too far from Fernie, there was this old native fellow kept telling the people, the residents, there were 2 or 3 banks at Frank Slide in those days, and this old native guy kept telling the people, the residents at Frank Slide there's going to be a big slide one of these days. He said, you know, it's going to be dangerous. He said, there's going to be didn't think anything of it. And one guy asked him, he said, well, what makes you think, he said, that there's going to be a really bad slide? He said, if you sit and watch every morning, he said, there's more and more little stones coming down. He said it's getting bigger, like, you know, what they were sliding down. And he said one of these days is going to be a big one, and sure enough, it covered the whole site, the whole town site. But it probably wouldn't have happened anyway. I mean, the slide would have still happened, but this old native fellow, you know, native people study nature so much, you know, nature so much better than white people do. And they can predict a lot of things just by watching nature. And that's exactly what that old man did. He had predicted that there was going to be a bad. And my grandpa was ill when they were trying to dig out, seeing it. But there's only one little girl that was saved, and she died about 12 years ago, I think it was, 12 or 13 years ago. Really? She was sitting with her little dog on the stone, which is a miracle because everybody else was killed. However she survived is a real miracle. But my grandpa told me all these stories, you know. And
so they were.
And that's why I said they were like gypsies. They moved from one place, and then from Fernie, they moved to what the heck's the name of that place? It's just on this side of the border of. It's at the corner of Alberta and BC in the States down there. I just can't think of the name of it. Anyway, that's not important. And from there, he moved to Drumheller in the coal mines Drumheller. And from Drumheller, they went back to BC, where my mom was born in Hosmer, BC, and she was 5 years old when they moved back to St. Louis. So from Drumheller, they had gone back to Hosmer for a while, and then they moved back to St. Louis, where they stayed after that. But I always said they were just like gypsies. They were moving they moved from St. Louis and St. Laurent to Montana and to BC and Alberta and back to Saskatchewan. So that's why I called them gypsies.
But you've mentioned that you've heard your grandparents speaking of Batoche and the resistance?
Oh, yes. My grandpa was 13 years old, his brother was 11 years old, and my great uncle, John Boyer, was 11 years old. And tomorrow when he goes in there, I'll show where they were hiding in the bush down by the river in St. Louis there. And the Northcott, Middleton and his men were going with the Northcott boat up to Batoche, and they saw all these soldiers and the big guns and everything, and they were terrified, and they were hiding in the bushes there. Because Middleton was going up to Batoche for the rebellion there. They were terrified. And then my granny, they were living in St. Laurent, and she was 11 years old, and when they were trying to salvage stuff from Xavier Letang's store, she drove a team of horses on a wagon with stuff and they went up in the foothills by the Menitas Hills or the Bellevue Hills to hide the stuff they were trying to salvage, all that. She said that they had beautiful big yards of material, silk material and stuff, and she had that loaded in a wagon, and she drove the horses, and she was 11 years old. She drove the horses up to the mountains there they were salvaging the stuff from Xavier Letang's store. So those are little stories that I know from the rebellion, because my grandparents took part in that. And my grandma Boye, she was so against war because of the rebellion. There had been the rebellion in the Red River settlement in 1870, and things didn't go good after that, and then they decided they were going to move further west. Like they were told that things were so good along the South Saskatchewan River and around St. Louis and Batoche, so the 5 families moved there, and then they had the other rebellion in Batoche. So she thought war was such a terrible thing, and when my dad joined the army, she was very upset because that was war for her again, and bloodshed and stuff, and she was totally against war.
Mm-hmm.
She thought that she didn't think people should be killing other people, that was her opinion. She hated war. And to her, rebellion was a real war,
Métis settlements, like the original ones, like at St. Laurent and Lecoq, places like that?
Yeah, like in St. Louis, there were only the five group of people, like 5 different families there in St. Louis. And then in St. Laurent was a different group of people. They were mostly people from Batoche, the Batoche area that settled around St. Laurent. And a few years before the rebellion, there was quite a village in Batoche. That was a really business place in Batoche. They had 3 stores. They had, like Mr. Xavier Letang, he had a beautiful store, beautiful furniture. They said it was just amazing, the beautiful stuff that he had in his store. In fact, in those days he would be considered like a millionaire. And he was, he liked people, and there were government people and priests from different places and nuns and that, government officials. They go and visit at Mr. Latang's, and they were welcome, and he'd have rooms for them, and he'd feed them like kings, you know. He was very, very well off man. And then after the rebellion, nothing, you know, everything was destroyed for nothing. Just sad. Mm-hmm. You know, he was considered to be such a great gentleman, kind to everybody, kind to the white people, kind to his Métis people, his own people. He'd do anything for his neighbors, and, you know, for getting his stuff destroyed. It was a real shame. It was heartbreaking. He was so well known, like my grandma always said that he was like a saint on earth, because he was just such a good man. And he got along well with government officials, you know. He tried his very best, but Gabriel Dumont, sometimes he got a little bit belligerent about stuff, you know, and he was a wise man. I'm not saying that Gabriel Dumont was not a wise man, but he took things into his own hands, maybe that, you know, if he had tried to settle with the government, maybe a little bit more, I don't know. I just don't know what could have happened. Sometimes I wonder if, you know, but the people were so upset about that script business and that they didn't understand it. That was the whole thing. They were not educated, and they did not understand what the surveying was doing, eh?
It was a difficult time for Métis people after that war, like you said.
Mm-hmm.
It really changed everything in so many ways.
Yeah.
The well-being, the families,
you know, the parents were grieving for their sons, and the wives were grieving for their husbands, and
a lot of loss.
Yeah.
A lot of loss.
Like your great-grandfather Jobin, he was killed in the rebellion also. And my great-grandpa Isidore Boyer and his brother were both killed in the resistance.
Are they buried in Batoche?
Yes, with that cross there.
Yes. We could maybe go visit there tomorrow, eh?
Yeah.
Go.
Ask, you can tell this to them, but do you remember how many families were at Batoche at that time?
Oh, there were a lot. There must have been maybe 15, 20 families in Batoche then. There were the Karens, the Paratos, the Pilons. They were the early settlers in Batoche. And Latans. The Latans also.
Did Lecoq and Boucherville and Lepine Flats get settled after Batoche?
Oh yes.
That came after.
That was in 1882.
Okay.
Because there was already the settlement in Batoche before.
Oh, before?
Yeah.
'Cause I remember you telling me the order of when all those settlements.
Yeah. Well, you see, the Lepine, they went more west along the river down in the flat there. That's why they called it Lepine's Flat.
Okay. Can we visit that space tomorrow?
Yeah, I'll show you
Flat
what
just
it
show us where it
yeah.
is. And then Boucherville, why did they name it
Boucherville
that?
is where all the Bushes were settled. There was Frederick Boucher, Joe Boucher, Salomon Boucher, Jean-Baptiste Boucher. That was all a group. They all had their river lots next to each other. And Jean-Baptiste Boucher, he was like Xavier Latendre. He was the one that Mass was said at their house, and a lot of social events were at his house. Like,
So the women would have been quite involved in receiving the guests.
oh yeah,
Right, and all the cooking and the
oh yeah,
hosting.
and there were a bunch of girls, so they had lots of boyfriends, and you know, yeah.
And can you share a little bit about the Saint Laurent mission? When, because people lived there in Saint Laurent also, when did the pilgrimage start there?
Well, I know that it started in the 1870s. Would be in the 1870s. The pilgrimage started after Mrs. Nolan was cured. That would be the 1870s it started. And my granny, the one that went to school at the mission, she helped the sisters and the other girls. They made that little niche that we call the grotto there in the tree. And they were carving that out by with little knives, pocket knives. They just had little knives, and they were going, and that's where they put that statue that Mr. Nolin ordered, because he had promised, like the priest had told that Saint Laurent reminded him of Lourdes in France, because this priest came from Lourdes, and he said that it reminded him so much of Lourdes because of the spring that went by and everything, and he told, and Mrs. Nolan was gravely ill. In fact, she wasn't supposed to be, to live for very long. And anyway, the priest said that if they did special prayers and so forth, and he blessed the water, that maybe she'd recover from her illness. And she did recover. And Mr. Nola had told the priest, he said, if my wife gets better, I'm going to order a big statue of the Blessed Virgin Mary and put it here for, so it would be like Lourdes. Sure enough, when his wife recovered from her illness, he did get that big statue. So then after that, they didn't know where to put it. So they decided that they were going to make, there was this big tree, so they decided they were going to dig into the tree so they'd make a place for the statue. And my granny was one of the girls, because she was living at the convent there at the mission at the time. So she helped making that little grotto there.
Did you remember going to the pilgrimage as a young girl? I remember as a family we'd go camp for a whole week.
I remember the first time I went with my granny and my grandpa. We went in the wagon, and we slept under the wagon. We went the day before, we slept under the wagon. He hitched his horses a different place, and we slept under the wagon, my grandpa said, "Oh, we're going to sleep under the stars." I was only about 5 or 6 years old then.
Aw.
But it was such a big deal to go to the shrine and sleep. I had never slept outside.
Yeah.
There we were sleeping under the wagon. Oh my goodness. What a big event.
What else do you remember about going to the pilgrimage?
I remember walking from the ferry right to the shrine area. That was kind of a penance to get prepared to go to the shrine. So we'd get off the ferry and we'd walk right to the shrine. So that was kind of a penance we were doing, to get prepared for the pilgrimage.
Was there a lot of visiting that occurred during the pilgrimage?
Oh yes. And you know what? There was this one old guy, he used to sell homemade beer all the time. He was bootlegging homemade beer like crazy at the shrine. And the women couldn't figure out, oh, the men are getting pretty yucky and stuff, And all this time they were buying this homemade beer from this old guy. Oh dear. Oh, that was funny. Yeah, the women couldn't figure out, gee, they're starting to feel pretty good, they're getting pretty tough. No wonder.
So did you go every year as a family, or?
Just about.
Yeah.
I even went lost after we were married. It seemed to be a yearly event to go to the shrine. And it was taking a picnic lunch, we'd always take our lunches and that, so that was the fun part of it. It was like going to the lake, going to the shrine. It was like going to the lake. It was very simple fun.
So just in general, what are some of the Métis values that have carried forward to now? What are some of the Métis values that you had that have carried forward to now?
Myself, I think it's trying to keep the family together. That's the main thing of the Métis, is keeping the family together. Family is the most important thing, I think, in Métis life. That's my opinion, I don't know, maybe. But I think it's very important.
Yeah, you can definitely tell that, the way you always have your family gather.
And it's always been like that, even when I was a little girl, with Grandma living with us, like in the summertime, her daughters and their families would come and visit. And it was always family, surrounded by family, And it was the same way with my mom's family. My mom's family came too, and it was just all one big family all the time. And when my granny passed away, my grandpa was blind. And my grandma boy was already blind. She had become blind overnight from glaucoma. And Grandpa Boyer was overseas. And when she was on her deathbed, when my granny was on her deathbed, she said to Granny Boy, she said, I know I'm going to be dying pretty soon. She said, do you think you can take care of of Dad. And because she was the baby of the family, eh? Granny Boy was the baby of the family. She had 2 older sisters, but they didn't have any patience. She didn't have the patience Granny Boy had. And Granny Boy said, well, I don't know, she said. Mother-in-law lives with us all the time, she said. I'd have to ask her what she thinks of it. So, when my mom got back from the hospital here in PA, she said to my grandma boy, she said, my mom asked me something, she said, but I have to ask you first before I can give her an answer. And she said, well, what is it? And she always called Granny my girl. Always, her daughter-in-law was always my girl. Oh, well, what do you have to ask me, my girl? She said, well, Mom asked me if she knows she's not going to live for very long, if my dad could come and stay with us. Well, by all means, she said, well, what do you think? She said, why did you tell her yes right away? My mom said, I wasn't going to say yes without, having your permission or something. Oh, no doubt, she said. Your dad has to come and live with us right now. She said he can move right now, she said. Because they knew my granny was going to, she had congestive heart failure. They knew that it was just a matter of time. So, they lived next door, but it didn't take them long to move. It moved in. So my dad was overseas, and my mom had these 2 blind people to take care of.
Really?
But that's Métis way of living, I guess. Like my grandma boy always called my mom my girl. That was her daughter-in-law, and she always called her my girl. That, I never knew any, you might think I'm bragging, but it's true. I didn't know any dissension when I was growing up, because my dad was a very gentle man. He never raised his voice. I never heard him raise his voice. And my mom lived with the mother-in-law all the time, and they got along well. I don't understand that people have to be fighting all the time.
I wonder what's changed to make it that way.
I don't know.
There's certain values or...
Children aren't taught to respect people the way they should. When you hear little kids, swearing at their teacher and stuff like that, I mean, that's unbelievable. But I was brought up to respect your teachers, respect your elders and that. And now little kids, well, I know one teacher, she just started teaching this year, and she was ready to quit. The first day she said she couldn't get over it, how bad kids are in grade 1 already. They have no respect. That's because they're not taught respect at home, I think. Or else it's because the parents don't have time to.
I think a lot of it is time. Like, you had to have the time to have people gather at your house, right?
Mm-hmm.
Every Sunday.
Yeah.
And just things I think were slower, and you had more time together.
Yeah.
It seems, than now.
That's my opinion. I think the basics have to be taught at home when they're little. They have to learn respect when they're little. That's why the youth centers are full of all these young delinquents and stuff. It's because they have no family life. They have nothing to do. The parents don't care. They're running the streets like, I just can't get over this in St. Louis. I know there's a lot of people who have these foster children. They're not taking care of those foster children properly. They're running the streets at 10:30, 11 o'clock at night. They're not. I don't know. I just don't understand it.
Part of the changes, I guess, eh?
Mm-hmm.
From when you were a young girl till now, things happened that changed.
Yeah.
That
Maybe
family
it's
life.
too much technology, too much TV. I don't know.
Here's a quick question, and how connected was each Métis settlement? Were you all connected in some way? Like, did everybody know everybody in Saint Laurent and Hoey and Batoche?
Just
and
about,
Duck
yeah.
Lake?
Just about.
And what was the connection like?
Oh, a lot of it was with the church. The church had a lot to do with it because they had to come from the from the Clock and from Fenton and from Hoey to come to the church in St. Louis. So actually, I think that was the great part of it, was the church.
Now, was there a lot of family connections? Was there people like dating or getting married in between these settlements at all?
Oh yes. Well, they didn't go too far to find their spouses. Yeah. Well, myself, I was married to my second cousin, so. And no, we knew just about everybody around, eh? Good or bad. And we knew all the gossip most of the time. I remember when I was a kid, my grandma and her great friend, Mrs. Helen Boucher, there, Mrs. Laton's, they were the best of friends, and they'd come and one would sit at the end of the table, and they'd each have their tobacco. They both smoked, but cigarettes, they didn't smoke the pipe. But anyway, if they had some really juicy gossip, then they'd put in a lot of Cree words so that I couldn't understand what they were talking about. And I knew, oh boy, there was something really good. They didn't use the Cree then.
It's interesting that they would have spoken Cree, that older generation.
Oh yes,
Our
they did.
grandmothers, eh?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, they did put in lots of Cree words. And that, I guess it was a good thing because if they didn't want the kids to understand what they were talking about, they had one up on us.
That reminds me of when I would stay at your house, and if you guys were arguing, you would argue in French.
Yeah.
But we knew you were arguing because you were raised voices, but couldn't understand what you were saying. So I think you learned that from.
Like Uncle Kevin, he'd all say, why don't you talk something I can understand when we talk French with Grandpa? He'd say, why don't you talk something I can understand? He still doesn't understand very much French, that one. The older ones, Auntie Lorraine and Auntie Linda, they didn't speak English at all when they started school. My two older daughters, because my mother-in-law lived with us all the time and she spoke only French, so all they spoke was French. So they kind of had a hard time when they started school. Because they didn't understand English. But now it's really quite handy because my daughter Linda, she's very involved with the Michif language. Eh?
So did they speak Michif also and French?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, she speaks the Michif French and the good French. The one thing about the Michif French it has that really, how can I say, it's very expressive, you know. I don't know, yeah, it's expression, like it's a, but kashi, you know, go on, but kashi, that's the way the Métis French is, there's a lot of expression to it, which makes it much more interesting. Like, you know, if you want to say, are you crazy? Teaching fool, you know, it has a more harsh expression to it. I told you about this one, an old cousin of mine. He talked really Michif, and anyway, this one fellow that they were visiting with said to him, I'll say it just like the Michif would, "Tu travailles-tu dimanche, boy?" And my old cousin said, "T'es-tu fou? J'ai jamais travaillé la semaine, comment vas-tu travailler le dimanche?"
Do you understand the chip?
No.
Anyway, these two old guys, my old cousin was visiting with this other guy, and the other guy said to him, "Do you work on Sundays, boy?" "Huh, are you crazy?" He said, "I never work during the week, why would I work on Sundays?" It's really funny.
Well, maybe we'll just do a closing question.
What do you want your grandchildren to know and remember about Métis life?
Oh, there are so many things. I think one thing is I'd like them to remember a few Michif words. You know, speak a little bit of Michif. And I'd like them to continue with the Métis foods. Bannock and bullets and bangs. Jam cookies, which are real Métis. Jams are really Métis cookies. So I'd like them to continue, especially with the Métis foods and a lot of the Michif language. I think is very important. And just visiting and getting together, having fun together, I think is what I would like my grandchildren to continue. You could be one of them to do that.
Thank you, Grandma, so much. Your mind is amazing. Like how you remember dates and facts. It's just
I don't know.
like, and just from before your time, like it's unreal to me. You are truly an amazing person.
I don't know. It just comes natural, I guess. I don't know.
Sophie, what are we going to say about you in 50 years?
Probably nothing.
When we remember Sophie in 50 years, what do you want us to remember about you?
I didn't think that's very important. I don't think.
How stubborn you were and fought? What's your gift that you want us to remember? We could all speak about your gift.
I know I'm very happy at my age that I can still talk with people, enjoy laughing and remembering old times. Like we'd say in Michif, the time koyosh. But I know I am quite fortunate. But I'm living on borrowed time right now, like, you know, after having 10 years ago today, I had that massive heart attack, and then I had my 8 bypasses. It'd be 10 years on February the 6th that I had my 8 bypasses, and I broke the record in Regina. Nobody had ever had 8 bypasses. And there were so many strangers just stop at my door. I was still in the ICU. And he said, "Are you the lady that just had 8 bypasses? And you're 80 years old?" I said, "Yeah, and I'm still here so far."
I think we will remember your strength and your mind, but also what I think my sister and I always say, that what we learned from you, from the McDougall side, is like unconditional love. Like, we have a huge family. You had 13 children. We didn't really talk about that, but so there's people make mistakes, but with your family, it doesn't matter. You really do practice family, unconditional love, and people are always accepted back no matter what. So I think that's kind of the biggest
And
thing we'll get from you.
I get along pretty good with my son-in-laws, and I get
Yeah.
along good with my daughter-in-laws, like Auntie Wanda and Jeannie and Darlene. I get along well with them, and
Yeah.
I get along good with my, well, I think I do anyway, with my son-in-laws. I've never had a bad word with my son-in-laws or anything, so I'm quite lucky. And I have quite a few son-in-laws.
One last question.
What makes you the most proud to be a Métis woman?
Hey,
What makes you the most proud to be a Métis woman?
I don't really know. I'm just proud of it, and I mean, you can't change things. If you're a Métis, you're a Métis. You know, that's one thing you can't change. A lot of people don't want to admit that they're of Métis descent, but it always comes out some way in the wash. No, I was never ashamed of it, because, like, when I went to school, I was always ahead of the other people in school. I'm not bragging, but I was in grade 8, and the grade 12, for writing an essay. I was still in the intermediate class, like I was in grade 8, and then there was a high school at the convent, like the high school part from 9, 10, 11, and 12, and everybody was writing an essay. Guess who won the essay? I did. I beat the grade 12s in the essay. I used to like to write a lot, eh? I liked writing. I should have been a writer maybe, but too lazy. I always say, "Oh, I'm going to write this, I'm going to write that," but I never got around to it. So, but I did love writing. That was one of my best subjects in school. Was English grammar and composition and that.
So people were, you've mentioned a couple of times that people didn't want to admit that they were Métis.
Oh yes. I know. I had cousins that would never admit. Well, their dads were well, one was a pure Irishman and the other one was a Scandinavian and that, you know. So, oh no, they would never. They were not a Métis, but the mothers were Métis, so they were Métis. But they would never admit it.
Why?
They were ashamed of being a Métis because a Métis had native blood in them. But it never bothered me. I got along, like, my best friend was a real French girl. And it never bothered me. I got along. I taught, I taught school in Wynyard. There was not one Métis person in that area that I taught school to. I got along very well with them. Didn't bother me. I was Métis, but they were Ukrainians, they were English, and It did bother me. I could stand up for myself. That was the thing. I would not be put down by nobody.
That's a good teaching to remember, eh, for all of us.
Yes, you have to be yourself, you have to defend yourself, and you have to be brave, whatever. You have to be a daredevil.
And stubborn.
Yeah. No, that you are who you are. That's my belief. And you have to be strong, and you have to prove your points. Like I had a big family and I raised my family. I know it wasn't easy with 6 boys. but I was also well known to be the worst mother in Holy. I was the toughest mother in Holy. That's what Duncan always said. And he always said, my mom had an offensive weapon. Oh, people said, well, what was her weapon? The lavette, he said. Give a good swat with my wet lavette there, and that was my weapon. But I was known to be well, it was because I was strict, I guess, with the boys, and I told them I wanted them home at a certain time. They had to be home at a certain time, or else I remember going and getting Uncle Ricky. Him and Marty Giegel were the best of friends, and I told him, you be home at 9:30, mister, because you have to go to school in the morning. I looked at the time. 9:30. Oh, I'll give an extra 5 minutes. No. Mr. Ricky wasn't home yet. I looked at the time, 20 to 10. Okay, put on my jacket, walked over, I found him, picked him up like this, bent him back, shoulders. Get home, I said, or else I'll kick your ass all the way home, I said. He went home. I didn't have to be mean, really mean or anything, but I just showed them that I was a boss, because if I had let them go, Ulrich being away working on sewer and water, he'd leave for 10 days and then come back for 4. I was alone to raise all those kids. If I had let one go, oh my God, it would have been a real... No, I didn't have to beat them up or anything. Didn't have to use physical abuse. But children have to learn to toe the mark. Maybe it's because I was a teacher. I don't know. And I always told my students when I started in a new classroom, we'll get along fine as long as you do what you're supposed to be doing at the right time. And I really never had any problem. There were boys way bigger than me. And you know, the first years I was teaching school, nobody ever knew my age. I was 16 and a half when I started teaching school. And I had students older than me, but nobody knew it. And a lot of us used to say, oh, teacher, when's your birthday? Oh, it's in December sometime. How old are you? Oh, I don't know. I never told them my age, because I thought if they know my age, then they might overpower me then. No, they didn't know my age. Because I had girls 16, 17 years old going to school. You know, in those days, a lot of kids were only in grade 4, grade 5, and grade 6 or 7. They really didn't have much chance to go to school, some of them. So they were older than me.